The first mistake the Karvok delegate made was assuming the quiet human behind Ambassador Sorelia Voss was decoration. I remember that moment with uncomfortable clarity because I was standing 12 feet away when the entire diplomatic chamber forgot how to breathe. The Hall of Accord was built to make every species feel civilized. White stone floors polished like frozen water. Floating translation lights above every seat. Flags from 87 member worlds hanging in perfect silence beneath the glass dome. It was the kind of room where wars were supposed to end with signatures, not with instincts. Ambassador Sorelia Voss stood at the center platform in her silver diplomatic robes, calm as a moonlit statue, her four violet eyes fixed on the treaty display hovering in front of her. She was Valari, which meant grace, patience, and a voice trained from childhood to make threats sound like poetry. Behind her, half hidden in the shadow of a marble pillar, stood her new Terran bodyguard, Caleb Walker, human male, 6 feet tall, maybe a little more in those plain black service boots. Brown hair cut short, no visible armor, no ceremonial blade, no energy shield, just a dark suit, an earpiece, and the relaxed posture of someone waiting in line at a coffee shop. That was what made him funny to the rest of us. The Valari usually hired armored sentinels from warrior moons, creatures with plated hides, thermal vision, or enough muscle to bend a hatch door. Sorelia had brought a mammal from Earth. Earth, at the time, was mostly known for strange music, stubborn diplomats, and sending representatives who smiled during arguments they were clearly losing. Caleb did not even look bored. He looked patient. There is a difference, though none of us understood it yet. Delegate Raxer of the Karvok Dominion stepped forward first, because of course he did. Karvok did not walk into rooms. They occupied them. 7 feet of ridged bone, ceremonial shoulder armor, and the permanent expression of a species that believed volume was a form of law. His honor guard remained near the east doors, their helmets turned towards Sorelia, like statues waiting for permission to become a problem. Raxer placed one clawed hand on the treaty console and leaned close enough to violate at least 3 diplomatic distance customs. Ambassador Voss, he said, his translator lowering his growl into polished English. Your colony routes cross-dominion interests. Sign a concession, or your people will learn how expensive pride can be. The chamber went still, not silent yet, but close. That first little pause before everyone decides whether they witness politics or a crime. Sorelia did not move. To her credit, her voice stayed smooth. The Valari Republic does not sign documents under intimidation. Raxer smiled. It was not a pleasant shape. Then perhaps you should have brought protection instead of a house pet. That was when the laughter started. Not loud. Worse. Polite laughter. Diplomatic laughter. The kind that lets cruelty wear expensive clothes. A few delegates turned to look at Caleb Walker. He remained exactly where he was, hands folded in front of him, eyes moving once across Raxer's shoulders, then the guards, then the exits. Sorelia glanced back, almost apologetic, as if embarrassed for him. Caleb gave her a small nod. Not proud, not offended, just present. I remember thinking that was the strangest part. Any other guard in the galaxy would have bristled. Caleb simply stood there, breathing slowly, as if the insult had passed through the room and missed him entirely. Raxer saw that calm and mistook it for fear. So did we. That was our second mistake. Here is what the chamber saw when it looked at Caleb Walker. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 heart, soft skin, no armor, no claws, no visible threat worth measuring. In a room filled with diplomats who had survived poison negotiations, border disputes, orbital sieges, and dinner with the Threlian tax ministry, the human bodyguard barely registered as security. He looked like someone who should be carrying a briefcase, not guarding a woman whose signature could move fleets. I watched the Valari aides near the lower platform exchange glances behind their glass tablets. One of them whispered something that my translator caught only halfway. Terrans are symbolic appointments now. Another covered, his mouth too late to hide a smile. Across the chamber, the Mirix trade envoy adjusted his optical lenses and scanned Caleb from boots to shoulders, clearly searching for hidden equipment. He found nothing impressive. No kinetic braces. No pulses shield. No reflex amplifier. No combat drone following a heel. Just a dark jacket tailored to, simply for galactic politics, and a plain metal watch on his left wrist. That watch bothered me later. At the time, I thought it was primitive fashion. Caleb's eyes moved again, not fast enough to look unnatural, but too steady to be casual. East door. Ceiling rail. Raxur's honor guard. Ceralia's left side. The emergency shutters above the dome. Then back to Raxur's hands. He was mapping the room while being laughed at, and somehow that was more unsettling than if he had reached for a weapon. But none of us were ready to admit that yet. The Karvok delegation certainly was not. One of Raxur's guards gave a low clicking laugh through his helmet speaker and said, "Does it fetch documents too?" Another asked whether Earth Guard were trained to bark when danger approached. That one got more laughter than it deserved. Polite laughter became open amusement, and open amusement became permission. The whole room relaxed for the wrong reason. Ambassador Voss did not. I saw her shoulders tighten by maybe half an inch. Valari control every public gesture, so half an inch is practically a scream. She turned just slightly toward Caleb and lowered her voice. "Mr. Walker, please do not respond." Caleb answered without looking away from Raxur. "Yes, ma'am." That was it. No wounded pride. No argument. No speech about human dignity. Just 2 words, calm enough to make the insult seem childish. Raxur hated that. Bullies need reaction the way fire needs air, and Caleb had given him nothing to breathe. The Karvok delegate stepped down from the platform, heavy boots striking the white stone with deliberate force. Each step echoed under the glass dome. He was not approaching Ceralia now. He was approaching Caleb. The distance between them closed from 20 feet to 15, then 10. Caleb remained beside the pillar, hands still folded, face neutral, breathing even. I remember thinking he had either remarkable discipline or no survival instinct whatsoever. Raxur stopped 3 feet from him, towering over the human by more than a full foot, and looked down with theatrical disappointment. "Does your protector speak only when commanded, Ambassador?" Ceralia's voice sharpened. Delegate Raxur stepped back. He ignored her. Everyone did. That was the 3rd mistake. Because while we were watching the monster make a show of his size, Caleb Walker was watching everything else. The first time Ambassador Ceralia Voss saw Caleb Walker do anything that resembled security work, she almost missed it. It had happened 3 hours before the treaty session, in the private arrival corridor beneath the Hall of Accord. I know because I was assigned to escort her delegation from docking Bay 9 to the chamber level, and at the time, I thought the human was being unnecessarily dramatic. He stepped out of the shuttle before the ambassador, looked left, looked right, checked the ceiling corners, counted the service doors, and touched 2 fingers to the small device in his ear. "Clear," he said. 1 word. Flat tone. No ceremony. Ceralia had thanked him with the polite patience reserved for staff members who take themselves too seriously. She was not cruel. That matters. She simply came from a civilization where personal guards were supposed to be obvious. Valari protectors wore mirror armor and carried light spears taller than most children. They announced danger by existing. Caleb carried her travel case without complaint. When one of her aides handed him a stack of documents, he took those too. When an elderly council clerk struggled with a floating crate near the lift, Caleb helped guide it through the doorway and nodded like that was also part of his job. To Ceralia, this confirmed the original suspicion. Terrence had sent her a courtesy officer, maybe a cultural observer wearing the title of Bodyguard, because humans liked dramatic labels. She had not been told the rest. None of us had. The assignment file listed him as Caleb Walker, Terran Protective Service, Diplomatic Attachment, fluent in Standard, cleared for close. Proximity to Class 1 officials. It did not list campaigns. It did not list threat ratings. It did not list Earth gravity tolerance, oxygen adaptation, or hand-to-hand response training. In hindsight, that absence should have terrified us. Powerful species brag. Dangerous ones redact. During the elevator ride, Ceralia had tried to make conversation. "Is this your first time in the central chamber, Mr. Walker?" Caleb looked at the reflective lift wall instead of at her. watching the corridor shrink behind them. Yes, ma'am. You seem calm. That is the job. And what exactly did your people tell you to expect today? He paused just long enough for me to notice. A negotiation that might stop being one. Sorelia smiled faintly, assuming it was human humor. Let us hope diplomacy proves more reliable than that. Yes, ma'am, Caleb said again. He did not correct her. That was the thing about him. He never corrected anyone unless survival required it. Back in the chamber, with Raxer now standing close enough to cast a shadow over him, I remembered that elevator pause and felt something cold crawl along my spine. Caleb had expected this. Maybe not the exact insult, not the exact bully, not the exact shape of the threat, but the pattern. He had seen the room before the room understood itself. Sorelia, still on the platform, finally looked at him with the first hint of uncertainty. Not fear, not yet, just the dawning realization that her quiet human escort had been listening to a different conversation all along. Raxer did not raise his voice after that. He did something worse. He became polite. In diplomacy, politeness is often where the knives are hidden, and every being in the Hall of Accord knew it. He turned away from Caleb as if the human had stopped amusing him and faced Ambassador Sorelia Voss again, spreading his arms toward the treaty display with the grand patience of someone explaining gravity to a child. Ambassador, let us stop pretending this is a negotiation between equals. The glowing document above the console shifted as his authorization mark appeared beside the unsigned clauses. Trade corridors, mineral rights, security oversight, emergency occupation privileges. Words gentle enough for a public archive, ugly enough for anyone who understood borders. Sorelia's expression remained smooth, but the color along the edges of her crest faded from silver to pale blue. Valari do not sweat. They change color when pressure finds them. Raxer saw it and smiled. Your outer colonies depend on 3 shipping lanes. The Dominion can close all 3 before your Senate finishes debating what to do. Your escorts are ceremonial. Your fleet is scattered. Your allies are watching to see whether you are worth the inconvenience. He looked around the chamber, and the worst part was that no one challenged him. The Mirix trade envoys studied his table. The Threlian observers pretended to review legal notes. Even the council moderators kept their hands folded, waiting for someone else to turn courage into policy. That is how intimidation works in civilized rooms. It does not need to break the law. It only needs to stand close enough that everyone remembers what fear costs. Sorelia placed one hand on the console. The Republic will not surrender civilian routes to military control. Surrender is such an emotional word. Raxer said, think of it as survival with better paperwork. A few of his guards made low sounds of approval near the east doors. Caleb's eyes moved to them for less than a second. Less than a second, and somehow he knew which one had shifted weight onto his forward foot, which one had touched a wrist control, which one was pretending not to watch the ambassador's hands. I only understood that later when reviewing the chamber recordings frame by frame. In the moment, all I saw was a quiet human looking almost bored. Raxer leaned in again, not enough to touch Sorelia, but close enough to make every Valari aide behind her go rigid. Sign it now. Spare your people the lesson. Sorelia's voice dropped. You are threatening a protected diplomatic envoy in a neutral chamber. I am offering clarity. You are offering coercion. The treaty display flickered between them, bathing both faces in blue light. Caleb shifted then, not dramatically. His right foot moved 2 inches. His shoulders settled. His hands unfolded. The change was so small that most of the room missed it, but Raxer's nearest guard did not. His helmet turned toward Caleb. A warning signal blinked once on the security wall, then vanished. My station console marked it as a posture anomaly. I almost dismissed it. Then Caleb spoke, calm and quiet, from behind the ambassador. Mom. Sorelia did not look back. Not now, Mr. Walker. Understood. He paused. But he is inside your safe distance. That sentence landed strangely. Not loud. Not heroic. Just factual. Like announcing that a glass had been placed too close to the edge of a table. Raxer slowly turned his head. Your pet has opinions. Caleb looked at him for the first time, as if he were no longer part of the furniture. "No, sir." His voice remained respectful, which somehow made it worse. "I have measurements." The chamber did not laugh that time. For 3 full seconds, no one in the Hall of Accord seemed to know what to do with Caleb Walker's answer. Measurements. That was the word that changed the temperature of the room. Not threats, not honor, not courage. Measurements. Raxor stared down at him, trying to decide whether the human had insulted him or merely failed to understand how fear was supposed to work. "You measure me?" he asked, each word heavy with offended pride. Caleb did not blink. "Yes, sir." Somewhere behind me, a junior clerk made a tiny sound and immediately pretended it had been a cough. Ambassador Sorelia Voss finally turned her head. For the first time since the session began, she looked less like a diplomat managing a crisis and more like someone realizing there was a second crisis standing quietly behind her, wearing a black suit and polished shoes. "Mr. Walker," she said carefully, "explain." Caleb kept his eyes on Raxor, but his voice softened when he answered her. "His right hand is 6 inches from the treaty console. His left shoulder is angled toward you. His forward foot is blocking your retreat line. 2 of his guards have shifted from ceremonial stance to ready stance. The 3rd is waiting for a hand signal." The chamber absorbed that in pieces. First the words, then the accuracy, then the fact that Caleb had noticed all of it while everyone else was busy being impressed by Raxor's size. The Karvok guards went still. That was the part one remembered most. Not Raxor's expression, not Sorelia's sudden silence. The guards, professional predators, trained from youth to show nothing, and every one of them froze because the soft little mammal had described their formation without even turning his head. Raxor's smile faded by a fraction. "Careful, human." Caleb nodded once. "That is also the job." Sorelia's lower hands tightened around the edge of the console. "Are you advising evacuation?" "No, ma'am." "Then what are you advising?" Caleb finally looked at her. His face had not changed, but something behind his eyes had gone very still. "Permission to remove the immediate threat from your personal space." The words were so calm that half the chamber needed a moment to realize what he had said. Then came the laughter again, but this time it arrived late and uneven. A few delegates laughed because they thought it was absurd. A few laughed because they were nervous. A few did not laugh at all. On the western bench, Elder Mavic of the Odrin Compact leaned toward his aide and whispered something urgent. His aide opened a secure tablet, typed Caleb's name, and within seconds his face drained to a pale gray. That got my attention. Odrins do not scare easily. Their species negotiates mining rights inside active volcanic belts for fun. Mavic touched the screen again, requesting a deeper clearance search. The tablet refused him. Then it flashed a red warning symbol I had only seen twice in my career. Restricted Terran Security Classification. My own console picked up the query and mirrored part of the public record onto the chamber side feed. Caleb Walker. Human. Origin World. Earth. Diplomatic Protective Assignment. The remaining fields were locked behind black bars. Not blank. Locked. That distinction matters. Blank means unimportant. Locked means someone very important decided you were safer not knowing. Sorelia saw the warning too. Her crest color shifted again, this time not from fear of Raxor, but from confusion. "Mr. Walker," she said slowly, "what exactly did the Terran Council assign you to prevent?" Caleb's answer was quiet enough that only the nearest microphones caught it, but the translation lights carried it to every seat. "An incident." Raxor let out a sharp breath that might have been a laugh if pride had not been choking it. "You think you can prevent me?" Caleb looked back at him. "No, sir." A pause. "Clean. Controlled. Terrible. I'm asking the ambassador whether she wants me to." The Hall of Accord went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not respectful silence. Not shocked silence. The older delegates had started reading the room differently, and the younger ones were watching them read it. Raxor had not moved, but for the first time, his shadow no longer seemed to cover Caleb. It seemed to stop at his shoes. The warning symbol on Elder Mavic's tablet spread faster than gossip and quieter than panic. One by one, private screens across the Hall of Accord began requesting Caleb Walker's file, and one by one, Those screens gave their owners almost nothing. Name, species, assignment, origin world, then the black bars. Always the black bars. I saw the Mirix Envoy try commercial database. Denied. I saw a Threlian legal officer attempt a council security cross-check. Denied. I saw one of the Valari aides whisper into her sleeve communicator, asking their embassy server for Terran protective credentials. The answer came back in less than 5 seconds, and whatever she read made her stop breathing through her upper vents. Then the chamber security system did what every system eventually does when too many frightened officials ask the same question at once. It updated the public threat board. Not fully, just enough. A thin blue identification beam swept from the ceiling and settled over Caleb's shoulders. He did not look up. He did not flinch. The board above the treaty platform flickered, cleared its diplomatic agenda, and displayed a short emergency profile in bright white letters. Caleb Walker, human, origin, Earth, planetary classification, Class 9 Deathworld, environmental tolerance, extreme, close protection rating, restricted, chamber risk protocol, do not escalate without authorization. That last line did something to the room that Raxur's threats had not. It educated us. Until then, Earth had been a joke with weather problems. A loud little planet with primitive habits and negotiators who drank too much coffee. Class 9 changed the flavor of every memory. Class 9 meant a world where the air itself could feed fire, where gravity built dense muscle and stubborn bones, where storms crossed oceans larger than most nations, where predators learned patience, and where the dominant species had survived by being more patient than the predators. I had read about death worlds in academy manuals. Everyone had. They were supposed to produce hardy microbes, angry plants, and the occasional mining disaster. They were not supposed to produce calm men in black suits who said yes, ma'am, and carried luggage. Ambassador Sorelia Voss turned slowly toward Caleb. Her voice came out softer than before. You are from a Class 9 world? Caleb gave her the same small nod he had given in the arrival corridor. Yes, ma'am. And no one thought to mention this to me. The Terran Council said it might complicate negotiations. That answer should not have been funny. No one laughed. Raxur's pride, however, had been cornered in public, and pride is one of the least intelligent survival instincts in the galaxy. He looked from the threat board to the silent delegates, then down at Caleb, and I watched him decide that the room had embarrassed him more than the human had. A classification is not a warrior, he said. Caleb did not answer. A harsh planet does not make you dangerous. Still nothing. Look at me when I speak to you. Caleb looked at him. The change was immediate and almost impossible to describe. His face stayed calm. His hands stayed empty. But his attention landed on Raxur with the weight of a locked door. For the first time, the Karvok delegate hesitated. Not long. Just enough to prove some ancient part of his body had understood what his mind refused to accept. Then one of Raxur's guards made the worst decision available. He lifted his wrist toward his command band, probably to signal the others, probably to force the chamber into a security lockdown. Before the moderators could respond, Caleb's eyes moved to the wrist. Sorelia saw it. I saw it. Raxur did not. Ambassador, Caleb said, still quiet, I need your answer now. Sorelia looked at the guard, then at Raxur, standing inside her protected space, then at the treaty that would give away her people's future under polite words and blue light. Her color returned, not silver this time, but bright, hard violet. Mr. Walker, she said, remove the threat. Raxur smiled because he thought permission made the moment theatrical. Caleb stepped forward because for him permission made it simple. Caleb Walker moved exactly once before the Karvok guard finished touching his command band. That was the part the recordings failed to explain. The cameras captured the motion, slowed it, measured it, argued about it, and still somehow missed the point. It was not speed alone. Plenty of species are fast. It was decision. Caleb had already chosen where everyone in that room was allowed to stand, and the rest of us were only just learning the map. His left hand caught the guard's wrist before the signal completed. Not crushed, not twisted in any dramatic way. Simply stopped. The command band gave one confused beep, then went dark as Caleb's thumb pressed the safety release with the casual precision of someone turning off an alarm clock. The guard stared at his own disabled equipment, as if it had betrayed him. Caleb stepped past him, placed the command band on the treaty console, and said no lockdown. The chamber's microphones picked up every word. Raxer reacted then, more from humiliation than strategy. He reached for Caleb with the full confidence of a being who had spent his life being larger than consequences. Caleb did not retreat. He shifted half a step to the side, let Raxer's momentum carry past the center line, and guided him down to one knee with a movement so clean it looked almost respectful. No cras, no spectacle. Just a 7-foot war-born delegate suddenly kneeling on polished white stone. One arm held at an angle that made further arguments seem unwise. The silence became physical. I heard the translation, lights humming overhead. I heard Ambassador Voss. Inhale. I heard someone near the Mirix bench whisper, that was not force. They were right. That was the terrible thing. Caleb had not overpowered Raxer in the way the Karvok understood power. He had not roared, shoved, or made a display. He had simply applied Earth physics to Karvok arrogance and let the larger body explain itself to the floor. The second guard moved 2 steps forward. Caleb looked at him. Just looked. The guard stopped, so quickly his armor plates clicked together. The third guard raised both hands away from his controls without being asked. Raxer tried to stand. Caleb leaned slightly closer and said, I would not recommend that, sir. Respectful again. Always respectful. Somehow, that made the entire scene worse for the Dominion. Raxer was not being humiliated by rage. He was being managed by procedure. Ambassador Soralia descended from the platform slowly, her robes whispering across the stone. For the first time since I had known her, she did not look like a symbol carved from diplomacy. She looked like someone standing beside a closed door and hearing something enormous breathing on the other side. Mr. Walker, she said, and her voice was steady only because Valari are trained from childhood to keep it that way. Is the chamber secure? Caleb glanced once at the guards, once at the exits, once at the moderators who had wisely chosen not to interfere. Mostly, ma'am. Mostly. That single word traveled through the room like a cold draft. The council moderator finally found enough courage to speak. Delegate Raxer, your escort will stand down immediately. Raxer's jaw tightened, but his guards had already understood the new mathematics. 3 of them, armored and armed, had been placed on the defensive by one unarmored human in less time than it takes most species to decide where to sit. Caleb released Raxer only after the moderators activated a neutral restraint field around the Dominion section. Raxer rose slowly, pride damaged far more than his body, and backed away from Sorelia's safe distance without being told twice. Caleb returned to his position behind the ambassador, hands folded, face calm, breathing even, as if nothing unusual had happened, as if rooms full of powerful people went silent around him all the time. And that was when I finally understood the real warning on the threat board. It had not said Caleb Walker was dangerous if attacked. It had said, do not escalate. Because Earth had sent one man, and one man had been enough. Ambassador Sorelia Voss did not speak for almost 10 seconds after Caleb Walker returned to her side. That may not sound long, but in a diplomatic chamber, 10 seconds can feel like a public confession. Every delegate watched her now, not because she had won the exchange, but because everyone wanted to know whether she had known what she brought into the room. Her face answered before her mouth did. She had not known. The realization moved through the hall of accord like a quiet signal. The Valari ambassador, one of the most careful negotiators in known space, had been standing in front of a Class 9 Deathworlder all morning and had treated him like a polite assistant with good posture. I saw it settle on her. The arrival corridor, the elevator, the way Caleb had carried documents, checked corners, opened doors, and answered every question with yes, ma'am. None of it had been weakness. None of it had been nervousness. It had been discipline wrapped in manners, which is a combination most species do not recognize until it is too late. Sorelia looked toward the neutral restraint field where Raxer stood with his honor guard, suddenly less like conquerors and more like students who had failed an exam they did not know they were taking. Then she looked back at Caleb. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked, quiet enough that it should have been private. But the chamber microphones were still active. Caleb kept his eyes on the room. "You did not ask, ma'am." A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. Not because the answer was rude. It was not. That was the problem. It was completely honest. Ceralia's fingers tightened around the edge of her sleeve. "I asked if you had served in protective work before." "Yes, ma'am." "You said yes." That was the accurate answer. Somewhere near the council bench, an Odrin elder gave a soft, humorless sound. "Humans, I would learn, have a talent for telling the truth in a way that hides the mountain behind the window curtain." Ceralia studied Caleb for a long moment, and something changed in her expression. Not fear exactly. Fear is simple. This was more complicated. It was the look of a woman realizing that the person behind her had never needed to raise his voice because the universe had already done enough shouting on his behalf. "What were you before this assignment?" she asked. Caleb paused. The black bars on the public file seemed to darken above him. "Available," he said. That answer did not help anyone relax. The treaty console chimed in, reminding the chamber that the proposed concession document was still open, still waiting for Ceralia's signature. Raxer straightened inside the restraint field, trying to recover the last scraps of authority. "This changes nothing," he said. His voice had lost some of its weight. Everyone heard it. "The Dominion's position remains unchanged." Ceralia turned toward him slowly. The pale uncertainty in her crest vanished, replaced by a hard silver glow. "No," she said. "Your position has changed. You are now standing farther away." It was not a joke, but the room felt the impact anyway. Caleb did not smile. He simply reached forward, tapped the treaty display, and highlighted the coercion clauses Raxer had tried to bury under legal language. "These are the pressure points," he said. 3 supply routes, 2 inspection loopholes, 1 emergency occupation trigger. Ceralia stared at the markings. "You read the treaty?" "During the laughter, ma'am." That sentence did more damage to Raxer's pride than any shout could have. While the chamber mocked him, Caleb had been studying the weapon hidden in the paperwork. Ceralia exhaled once, very slowly. Then she faced the council moderators and spoke with a voice that finally matched the person standing behind her. "The Valari Republic rejects the Dominion proposal in full. We request formal review of coercive conduct, illegal security positioning, and predatory treaty construction." The moderators nodded too quickly. Raxer said nothing. His guards said even less. And Caleb Walker, the human everyone had mistaken for decoration, returned to silence, as if silence had always been his natural habitat. The official record says the session ended with a procedural suspension, a security review, and a formal objection filed against the Karvok Dominion. That is how governments describe moments they are too embarrassed to remember honestly. What actually happened was simpler. The galaxy adjusted its opinion of humans in real time. No vote was taken. No speech was required. You could see it in the way the delegates avoided looking directly at Caleb Walker, then looked anyway. You could see it in the way the moderators spoke to Ambassador Ceralia Voss with sudden warmth, as if they had always respected her position and had not spent the last hour waiting to see whether she would fold. You could see it most clearly in Raxer. He remained inside the restraint field until chamber security escorted his delegation out through the east doors, and not once did he look away from the human in the black suit. Not with hatred, not even with anger, with calculation. The old kind. The kind every surviving species learns when it realizes it has found something that does not need to be bigger to be worse. Caleb did not stare back. He was busy helping Ceralia collect the revised treaty files from the console. That was perhaps the most insulting thing of all. To Raxer, the moment had been a humiliation that would stain his family banners for generations. To Caleb, it appeared to be Tuesday with extra paperwork. When the Dominion doors sealed, the chamber finally began breathing again. Conversations restarted in cautious fragments. Chairs moved. Translators corrected themselves. Someone laughed too loudly and stopped. Ambassador Ceralia stood very still in the center of the platform, looking at the place where Raxer had stood, then at the treaty clauses Caleb had marked during the laughter. I was wrong about you, she said. Caleb glanced at her. Most people are, ma'am. Does that bother you? He considered the question with the calm seriousness of a man deciding whether the truth would be useful. It makes my job easier. Sorelia looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Not the polite nod she had used in the corridor. Not the distant nod of an ambassador acknowledging staff. This was different. This was recognition. Around them, the Hall of Accord had become a classroom, and every species inside had just learned the same lesson at once. Humans did not advertise danger correctly. They did not grow ceremonial armor. They did not decorate themselves with threat colors. They did not announce dominance in the approved galactic fashion. They smiled. They carried luggage. They said, "Yes, ma'am." They read the exits while pretending not to. They let arrogant beings talk until the room itself became evidence. Later, the Council amended close protection protocols for all Terran security personnel. Not because Caleb requested it. He requested nothing. The amendment was written by frightened administrators who had watched one human turn a political trap into a footnote without raising his voice. From that day forward, no one in the Central Chamber referred to Caleb Walker as the Valari ambassador's escort. The old title sounded too small, too soft, too painfully stupid. They called him the Deathworlder behind the Diplomat. Sorelia never corrected them. In private, I once heard her ask Caleb if Earth truly was as terrible as the manuals claimed. He thought about it for a moment and said, "It has nice sunsets." That was when I understood. Earth had not made humans loud. It had made them calm in places where everyone else panicked. It had taught them that storms pass, predators blink, pressure reveals weak points, and fear is only useful if you do something with it. We had believed Deathworlders were dangerous because they came from a hostile planet. We were wrong. They were dangerous because they could leave that planet, enter a room full of monsters, and still act like the room was the easy part.